Everybody, welcome back to another video. Today is part one of my two-part series, the Gimme Hemi experience. This is what it's like getting a professional Hemi swap installation on my 392 Gladiator. Part two will be what it's been like living with and the performance, the maintenance, the issues I've had with the 392 Hemi. So why did I do a Hemi swap? Well, power is the obvious reason, but let's go back in time and I'll tell you what happened in my situation. So I bought this used in 2020. It's a loaded Rubicon launch edition, so it has every option that the factory came with. Got a really good deal on it, $47,000 with 7,000 miles. So that was a great place to start. Then I drove the Jeep and towed with it and wheeled with it. I built it up. I put 37s on it, a 3.5-inch lift, 513 gears. So why did I do a Hemi swap? Well, the long story short is that I had that infamous valve failure at 58,000 miles. So the valves dropped, hit the cam, screwed up the engine, gave me a bunch of codes, and I had to have the entire top end rebuilt and replaced. And that was all done under warranty, the powertrain warranty by Mopar, because I was under 60,000 miles. After that, I did not trust the V6. I figured it would happen again or something worse, and it was so underpowered. I mean, let's be realistic. When you put 37s or anything bigger, when you do a lift, when you put, the heavier suspension and steering on it, this V6 just wasn't designed for that. You're talking 285 horsepower and maybe 260 pound-feet of torque in the stock Pentastar V6. It's just not destined to do the things that I was asking from it. I was also towing. I was using it like a truck. I was towing a 5,000 pound load trailer. And so it wasn't being fair to the V6, let's be honest. So when that happened, I just decided, this may be a jumping off point for me. I'd already built the Jeep. I really like the Jeep platform. I had a lot of money invested in it already. And from my point of view, doing a Hemi swap would essentially give me a new vehicle. And to me, that made sense. Sure, there's lots of cheaper ways to do this than paying a professional shop to do the Hemi swap for you, which is what I did. You can do an LS swap out of the junkyard. You can buy a crate engine and do it with yourself and your buddies. You can pay a third-party professional shop to do it with a crate engine they order, for example, from America's Most Wanted. Another reason that I chose a Hemi swap was that I did not want to do a supercharged V6. Look, this engine had already failed me once, and I had no confidence that a supercharger would give me the kind of performance and reliability long-term that I was looking for. The pressures created by that supercharger, in my opinion, aren't something over time that is going to last and not blow up this engine. They put this engine in minivans. Yes, it's tuned a little bit differently for the Jeep, but whatever. I just didn't think that trying to supercharge an already weak engine for what I was asking it to do would have been the choice. So why did I choose the 392? I chose the 392 because, number one, it had already been in the Wrangler from the factory as an option. And so I had hoped that, since it was already being actually used in the Jeep platform from Dodge, or from Mopar, that I would have great support and be able to get parts. It just made a lot of sense. I wasn't putting in an exotic 1,000 horsepower Elephant motor into this. It was something that Jeep was already doing. So it made a lot of sense to choose the actual 392. Of course, a 5.7 Hemi is also used in other Ram trucks, and that would have been an option too. However, I chose to go with the 392 because of the Jeep tie-in with the Wrangler. And 505 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque it's attractive, let's be real. So why would you get this professionally done versus a junkyard swap or doing it yourself with your buddies, going to another shop? For me, I don't have the tools, the skills, the time to do something like this. I mean, it's complicated. To get it done right, there's a lot of tuning that has to be done, even after the mechanical part, and finessing everything, and it's a big ask. You really got to know what you're doing. And that's way beyond anything I could possibly do. So another part of the reason for doing that was that there was also a warranty. Now, I chose America's Most Wanted for several reasons. One of those is I looked into various shops that do this kind of work, and America's Most Wanted was one of the more reputable ones, as well as that's all they do. They do this full time. They build Jeeps, and they offer everything from the 5.7 all the way up to the Elephant. They have a massive shop in Burton, Michigan that I'd seen online, and the warranty really did sound good. 3 years, 36,000 miles was what was being offered when I did this swap in October of 2023. And so that's 1 year on labor and 336 on parts. That gave me a lot of peace of mind. Also, I was given the promise by America's Most Wanted that because it was a 392, that I could go to any Jeep dealer and have the 392 worked on or serviced. If I had warranty problems, I could go to a Jeep dealer, and then America's Most Wanted would pay for whatever warranty work that the Jeep dealer did. So that all looked really good in theory. Another reason was that when I got there and I took a tour of their shop in Michigan, it's massive. I have about 20 to 25 lifts. They're doing all sorts of builds. I'm on the low end of the work that they do. So I felt really confident looking at their shop that they had people who knew what they were doing. They're also very nice people. They're very professional. I was treated with respect, even though I wasn't buying a giant Elephant, just a little Jeep Gladiator 392 build, the basic 505 build that they call it. And I will put screenshots here of the build that I ordered and what was done for my build, and you can pause the video to take a look in detail at what I've got. Another thing that I liked about AMW when I talked to them is that they didn't try and upsell me. They were real with me about what it would take to do this build, and so that was reassuring too. I didn't feel like it was a gimmicky type of installation. It was all business and all professional. Another way to go this route, if you don't want to bring your Jeep to Michigan, is they have a network of dealers all over the country that are certified to install their crate engines of whatever type. And I'll put a picture up here of what the dealer network looks like currently for their installations. So let's talk about the good. First of all, it's the quality of the installation. Well, here's what you get for your money. Not totally clean engine bay, sorry about that, but hey, this is a real used vehicle, I drive this everywhere, I do everything with it. But if you look at this fit and finish, it looks factory. Gotta say, very happy with it. Not much that changed in here. See, one of AMW's relays is in here. Otherwise, everything else in the engine bay, besides your battery, electrical system, the brakes, and the steering components, from the steering wheel through the firewall are unchanged. One huge bonus of this system is that it is an auxiliary battery delete. There is no auxiliary battery for this system. Insert applause here. You never have that issue. This is the auxiliary wiring harness that wasn't properly attached above the shock tower after the installation. It is locked down now, and this cable goes up to the right here where it loops up, and then it goes in through the firewall, which is real hard for me to get to show you right now without taking the fender liner out. So what you're looking at here is one of the engine mounts. You can see the welding that was done for the Hemi by AMW. Really quality looking welds there. And that's the same thing on both sides. Let's pull back and just kind of look around under here. See what's what. There's your headers coming down. There's the heat wrap on the exhaust. So we'll try and move around here. There's your deep sump 8-quart oil pan. And here's another look at the other engine mount and those nice looking welds. The oil changes are very easy to do. 8 quarts of your finest Pennzoil SRT synthetic is recommended, which is what I've been using. A little wet under here. So following the exhaust back from the header here, you can see it's wrapped and there's heat insulation around it. There's one of the new cats. And coming to the back here, interestingly, they reuse the transfer case if it's a Rubicon model, if it's relatively low miles, and they reused my transfer case. See, the exhaust from the passenger side comes around this Y pipe and makes a connection over here, and then it moves down. There's one of your mufflers, and in my case, this is some of the custom work I had to have done because of this large auxiliary gas tank from Long Range America, which will be the subject of another video. I'd still like to see the exhaust raised up a little bit higher, but it's not much lower than the Long Range America auxiliary fuel tank. The exhaust comes back, there's another silencer, heat wrapped all the way to back here, and you can still fit a 37 in the tire carrier. As you can see, starting up the Jeep, there's no codes. Ready to go, just like stock. So here's how the process worked with me for AMW. I contacted them, I made an appointment to come bring my Jeep up and give them a deposit on what I wanted to do. I had chosen their 505 package for the 392 swap, and at that point they inspect your Jeep. They look at it, they test drive it, they may make recommendations about what you should upgrade, and then you schedule an appointment for the actual install. So after contacting them in July, I drove up, I believe, in August, and then my appointment to drop off the Jeep was in October. So I drove back in October, I dropped off the Jeep, I got another tour of their facility, which is excellent. You know, at least 20 lifts, all sorts of work being done around the shop, and on all sorts of builds, even SEMA builds. And every conceivable drivetrain that you see on their website is being built there, multiple builds at one time. I saw a dedicated crew of 2 people. All they did all day was weld mounts, new engine mounts to the chassis, to the frame. And it just looked like a real well-oiled machine, and everybody was super nice and professional. And so that was a really good, confidence-inspiring experience. So after my inspection, they had recommended some upgrades and changes. Number one was the dual rate heavier springs for the front. Even though I had Evo springs in the front that were already 3.5-inch lift, I needed a heavier rate spring because of the engine being 300 pounds heavier than the stock V6. Second was I had a Long Range America fuel tank installed, and so they couldn't do their standard exhaust for the 392. They had to do a custom exhaust and move it for accommodating the Long Range America fuel tank. That got real spendy. They charged me $1,500 for the custom exhaust to accommodate for the extra fuel tank rather than their standard setup that they had sitting around on the benches. So I was not thrilled about that, be honest. Also, they recommended upgrading to Steer Smarts from the Metal Cloak. The Steer Smarts, the Yeti XD is just what they do in their shop. And my steering, 1-ton steering, already had 50,000 miles on it, and I was having wander and some other problems. And so it seemed like a good thing to do, and so I did that. That all together was like another $2,500. So let's get to the bad. And there's no way around it. I mean, this is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Ended up being $40K in 2023 with everything that I had into it, with tax kind of out the door. Again, I'll pop up my build sheet here. So Long Range America plans for 40 hours of labor for the basic installation. If you're doing anything extra like steering and other upgrades, that's more labor, more parts. So that's something you have to take into consideration. So the other bad I'd say would be they didn't meet their timeline for install. So, I contacted them in July, dropped it off for the install in October. They didn't start working on it till November. I didn't get it back till mid-January. And that was a real bummer. I was kind of losing my patience. They said 6 to 8 weeks in the beginning, but that turned out to be 3 months. And part of that was because of Christmas and Thanksgiving. Then when their shop was closed, also they had a bunch of SEMA builds, which, I don't care about. I just want my job done. But overall, it took a little bit longer than I would have liked. So bad thing number 2 was there is no real dealer support on a hemi-swap. I wanted to bring it to a dealer, and dealers wouldn't touch it. I called several dealers in my area, and when I told them that I had a hemi-swap with a crate engine, they said, we don't even want to talk to you, basically. It's just, some of them were rude. They wanted nothing to do with me. They wouldn't touch it. And that was something that was promised to me by AMW in the beginning, and one of the reasons I went with them was they said that you could get this 392 serviced or have any work done on it at any dealer, and that just really wasn't the case. It even got to the point where AMW called for me to various dealers to see if they would look at my transmission harness issue, and to their dismay they were also turned down by Mopar. So look, if you want to get brakes done, if you want oil changes done, maybe spark plugs, basic maintenance stuff like that, batteries, whatever, dealer will be happy to charge you for that, but they will not look at a hemi-swap. They don't want to be liable for work that somebody else did, even if, a reputable company like AMW, a big company like AMW, is willing to pay for the warranty work directly to the dealer. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have problems and go back and forth with a third party. So that's just a fact. And I think, unless that situation has changed in the last couple of years, you'll have to take that with a grain of salt if you're promised that type of warranty support from the dealer network at Mopar. Okay, so let's get to, quality of installation issues. Number 1, there really hasn't, overall quality is fantastic. This looks and drives and feels like it came that way from the factory. America's Most Wanted, their fit and finish on the work and the job was, 99% excellent. One issue I've had that's caused me some side of the road mechanicals and some anxiety on trail is that there's a transmission wiring harness that runs from the firewall to the engine, and unfortunately that is a weak point in this particular build for some reason. It could just be my situation, I'm not sure. But from the factory, when you have the V6, that wiring harness is zip tied to the firewall. There's a mount for it on the firewall. And then it's zip tied also where it travels down on top of the shock tower. It's zip tied to that, and then it goes into the engine to make that connection. And then I noticed that, number 1, that wiring harness was not zip tied back to the firewall after installation. The reason this is an issue is because there's a connector that has to be disconnected for them to raise the cab off of the chassis to do the swap. And then when the swap is done, they lower it back down, they reconnect the wiring harness from the firewall to the engine, the new engine, and you're good to go. Well, when I'm driving this thing and wheeling hard off-road, what would happen is when the body is flexing one way, the chassis is flexing one way, and the engine is, maybe moving on the motor mounts a little bit with revving, it would put pressure on that transmission harness and it would cause the pins to just lose perfect connection, and that would cause a fuse to blow in the fuse box, which I'll show you here, and that would make the Jeep essentially undrivable. I got all these error messages on the dash and flashing lights telling me transmission issue, do not shift out of drive, do not turn off the engine, please drive to the nearest service area. Those are real disconcerting messages when you're on the trail and you don't know what to do. And fortunately, the first time this happened was at my house, like in my driveway. And I'll give America's Most Wanted their due. Their service support on this was as good as you could expect. They helped me diagnose the issue with the transmission wiring harness, that connection, and they told me which fuse to replace in the fuse box. That the transmission wiring harness, I think, is still too short, and it can still happen under extreme conditions. So down the road, the fix here would be to get a longer transmission wiring harness between the firewall and the engine so that there is way more than enough slack for that to get stressed under adverse conditions. That won't happen again. So that was a big bummer. Big issue number 2 would be that the catalytic converters have failed twice. Now, this is a bummer, but America's Most Wanted has stood by their warranty. They have replaced the catalytic converters twice. The second time, they replaced the entire exhaust system. The first time it happened, I only had a few thousand miles on the Jeep, and they had me bring it to one of their authorized dealers in Baltimore, so I didn't have to drive back to Michigan from Virginia. And to be honest, that shop screwed this up. Number one, America's Most Wanted sent cats to the shop, just cats. So we could just, take their existing exhaust and just cut out the cats and put new cats in. Easy peasy. However, the shop told me that America's Most Wanted sent them the wrong cats. And the wrong size cats. They were the wrong diameter for the 3.5-inch MagnaFlow. I don't know how that happened or if that's really accurate. The shop told me that they had the correct cats on hand and also other exhaust to make it work. And so America's Most Wanted worked with them, and they paid the shop. I didn't pay a dime out of pocket for any of that. And so that shop put in their cats and the rest of the exhaust to make it work. And, no codes, drove away, didn't have a problem, everything seemed fine. Ultimately, I realized that their installation was bad. The Y pipe was sitting on the cross member, and also one of the parts of the exhaust was touching the transmission housing, and you just can't have that. This got fixed by a different shop in California after I moved to California about 6 months later. The cat failed again on the driver's side. I told them about the problems I'd had with the quality of the installation by the other shop in Baltimore. And so America's Most Wanted sent out an entire exhaust, headers back, the whole thing. And this other shop did a great job tucking up the exhaust, making sure nothing hit, and it's been fine ever since. So, this was unfortunate, but kudos to AMW. The 1-year labor warranty had already expired, but because I had 2 issues with this, they honored the entire thing. So, that was pretty solid. And I'm happy with that. And I've had no issues since. Well, tell me what you think about this type of installation experience and what you're interested in the comments below. I'll put links below to America's Most Wanted's website. And, this is not affiliate link. I'm not sponsored in any way by America's Most Wanted. This is my experience with my money and my Jeep. And overall, with the bad luck on the cats and dealing with the transmission harness issue, I would probably do it again. But it would be a little bit harder of a decision, to be honest, because I'm going to post the new prices as of today. That from 2023 till now, the prices have gone up. The 505 build I got was $34,995. Now it's $39,995. $5,000 increase. They have decreased the warranty from 3 years, 36,000 miles, parts and labor, labor for 1 year, parts for 36, to 12 months and 24,000 miles. So that's a bummer. So that's all I have for you today. Come back for part 2, where I go in depth into what it's been like living with the Gladiator, driving, towing, mileage, power, miles of smiles I think I've gotten from this, as well as people love this Jeep. People want to talk to you about it. They stop you on the street. I'll get into all that. And hey, thanks for sticking around. We'll talk to you soon. Let's do a 0 to 60.